What do you call the thing that you put your leftovers in?
You call it Tupperware.
I do too.
Yeah, that's absolutely what you do.
I don't think I've ever even had Tupperware, and I think I call it Tupperware.
That's the ultimate compliment, isn't it?
Welcome to The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Havershrud. Tupperware, which has been a household name for 70 years, just filed for bankruptcy. But its legacy goes beyond leftovers. And yeah, I call all of my plastic containers Tupperware because I'm my mother's son. Also today, before you can get a mortgage, you have to pass the stress test. But Canadians are also struggling to afford houses. So could the stress test be too stressful? Up first, you've heard of Freedom 55. How about Freedom 45? Or 35? Maybe even 25? Ellis, it's like we're in a mindfulness app up in here.
Yeah, but this is kind of what it sounds like every day where Nick and Melanie Thompson live.
So we're in one of three valleys called the Valleys of Longevity.
I'm sorry, he's in the Valley of Longevity?
In the Valley of Longevity, that's what it's called. They live in southern Ecuador in the Andes Mountains. Nick and Melanie moved there with their 4 kids from Ontario a little over a year ago.
It's the land of eternal spring, so it never gets below 16. It never gets over 27. It hardly rains. It's sunny every day. There's no bugs, so it's kind of like this really cool Goldilocks zone.
Well, this sounds lovely.
Yeah, I know, right? They live in this 700 square foot adobe house in the country with mango, avocado, banana trees. And the kids go swimming in the river nearby.
It is mountain spring, so it's a little chilly. And then there's these giant rocks there that heat up in the sun. So then you see them all just basking in the sun on the rocks.
They're like seals.
They just kind of melt there.
So what are they doing with their kids melting there like little seals?
Well, they're taking a year-long break from work. They're part of a trend that's growing, micro-retirements.
And this is like probably what it sounds like, a little retirement?
Yeah. And Nick figures, life is short. You only live once. And that hits home for Nick. He watched his parents save and plan for retirement. Then his mom passed away before they got a chance to enjoy it.
So that would really instill in me, it's like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not waiting till I'm 65 and can't hike a mountain to go travel the world and see things in a walker, right? It's like, I'm going to do this now when I'm fit and when I'm able to, right? And when I know I can do it, right? Not pushing things off. Like, let's do it now, right?
So instead of retiring for good at the end of his career, he's making stops along the way. And some people call it a sabbatical or an adult gap year.
And you said more people are doing this.
They are. I talked to some HR experts who say more employees are asking for more time off. Sabbaticals have always been a part of academia, but they're part of the corporate world too. Companies like Shopify, Deloitte, McDonald's, they all offer some kind of sabbatical program.
And is this coming from employees? Like, are they agitating for more work-life balance?
Well, Gen Zs and millennials, they're all about that. Like Nick and Melanie Thompson, they're in their late 30s. This is their 3rd micro-retirement. And they're not alone. The pandemic made a lot of people rethink their relationship with work.
A lot of people started questioning, is this all of my identity? Is this all of my value? Is this my entire purpose in life? Is this job? Or are there other things that actually really matter to me that perhaps need some time and energy as well?
Jillian Johnsrud is a mini retirement veteran. She and her family have taken a dozen of them over the years.
She's retired 12 times.
Yes. She just finished her last one in the spring. She does all sorts of things during these mini retirements. She's done road trips. She's decluttered her home.
One summer, I built a food forest in my backyard. It took 3 months. Some people join a band or, learn a new language or take classes.
Jillian's turned micro-retirement into a career. She hosts a podcast called Retire Often. Her tagline is, "Why retire once when you can retire often?" And she coaches other people how to do it.
Okay, then, well, how do you do this? Like, how do you afford to do something like this?
Well, I spoke to some financial planners, and they all told me the same thing. It depends. It depends on your cash flow, your investments, your savings. It takes a lot of planning. Jillian has a formula. She says if you can put aside 6.5% of every paycheck for 2 years, it'll buy you 1 month off.
Well, 6.5%, like, that would squeeze you, but it also, sounds somewhat doable.
Yeah, but it might mean making choices. Like for the people she coaches, it might mean choosing a mini retirement over buying a nicer car or going out to dinner.
Maybe they're not eating out at Chipotle, but in 2 years, they're going down to Mexico and they're going to be eating street tacos. You know, it's kind of delayed gratification, but not delayed for 40 years. We're going to postpone a few little things now to have a really incredible experience.
And it also depends on what kind of break you plan on taking. Like, are you going to rent a villa in France for a year or go somewhere where the loonie goes further? Like Nick and Melanie. They chose Ecuador because it's way cheaper to live there. Like about a third of what it costs in Canada.
Okay, so there are ways to figure the money part of this out, maybe if you plan for it. But what about your job? Like if someone's listening and they're thinking, yeah, I kind of like the sounds of this. If someone takes a break, can that hurt your career?
It is something to think about. I spoke to Philip de Villers. He's the head of CPHR, an organization that represents thousands of HR professionals. He says it could be tricky if you're just starting out and you're keen on moving up the ladder. Like if there are a bunch of you who all started around the same time and you're the one who takes 6 months off.
You basically lost those 6 months. Now, it doesn't mean that down the road, 30 years later, is it really showing? No, but maybe your colleague will have the promotion before you, because basically, if you're not there, people are going to just forget about you. And so you're losing some opportunities.
And if you're with a smaller company, let's say you are the entire IT department, taking a gap year might not go over very well.
Well, yeah, because you know what? Somebody's got to tell you to turn the computer on and off to fix it. Kidding, IT folks. But yeah, this can come with risks for different jobs. But if you have the type of job or employment where it's not as much of a worry, like you're a contractor, then maybe this starts to feel more possible. The other question, though, Ellis, that I have that comes to mind, though, is what about your real retirement? Like if you're spending this money along the way to take these little breaks, are you still able to save for when you're old?
Well, yeah, you have to figure that out too. You have to save more for your mini and for the real final one. And you may have to work longer. But maybe you're okay working past 65 because you've taken these breaks along the way. And if you do this, Jillian says you can look back
and say, I did 10 incredible experiences. I did all these things in my 20s and my 30s and 40s and 50s and with my kids and with my grandkids and with my friends. And I don't feel like at 65, I have to make up for all this lost time.
That's how Nick and Melanie see it. They're not interested in climbing the corporate ladder. They have a formula. Work 3 years, take 1 year off. Nick just changes jobs. He's worked as an engineer. He's run a vineyard. He's invested in real estate. Right now, Nick and Melanie just want to spend time with their kids.
And they're happy?
Yeah, it's already been more than a year in the Valley of Longevity.
I think we're going to be here for a little longer.
Yeah, we are living our best life now. And so for the foreseeable future, I'd like to continue that.
Feels like this micro retirement could, turn into a macro retirement.
I know, for now. But what do you think?
Like, would I do this?
Yeah.
I never really thought about it. I just thought you just kind of like work, and then, that's it for life. But, well, Ellis, they say, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Oh, brother Paul.
Thanks, Ellis.
You're welcome.
What about you? Do you think you could pull off a mini retirement, like financially? And if so, what would you do with your time if you took a break? Give us a call and let us know. Our number is 1-866-550-COST. That's 1-866-550-2678. Or email costofliving@cbc.ca. This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Havershrud. When you're buying a house, the number that jumps out, the price. But the number that really matters, in a nitty-gritty life sort of way, is your mortgage payment. The federal government wants to bring that monthly number down. So it's resurrecting a classic, the 30-year mortgage. Longer mortgages will lower monthly payments. But could the feds do anything else to help more people afford a home?
I know that I'm a real estate agent and I want people to get in the housing market and I really want them to get a home. But sometimes I have to kind of step back and go, but at what cost?
Develle Morrison says there's no way around it. A home that takes 30 years to pay off instead of 25 will cost you more.
Yes, it's going to bring your mortgage payments down, which is great. But then when you think about how much interest you're paying over the long term, you realize it's the bank that's getting rich.
And we're not talking small change. An extra 5 years of interest payments could cost tens of thousands of dollars.
The banks are popping their champagne. You know, I posted about this on my social media, and literally somebody said to me, yeah, I just doubled down my stocks on the banks.
If we really want to do something for consumers, Develle says we should be looking at the stress test.
Mortgage stress test. What the is it?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. The mortgage stress test was designed by Canada's bank regulator back in 2016.
New rules went into effect today that could make it harder for some to buy a new home.
It was meant to keep home buyers from getting in over their heads, protect us from a US-style housing crash, and cool off an overheated housing market. So here's how it works. If you want to get a mortgage, you need to prove you can make payments on an interest rate of 5.25% or 2% more than the rate you get offered by the bank, whichever is higher. But Will Dunning says the bar was set too high.
Stress test is being too onerous.
Will is an independent housing market economist in Toronto. He says the stress test has had unintended consequences. People unable to qualify for mortgages have stayed in the tight rental market. And Will also thinks,
if people can't buy homes and they can't buy newly built homes, then builders will construct fewer of them because they can't sell as many.
And unless you've been living under a rock, you know Canada doesn't have enough housing.
And so it's a stress test over a very long period of time has made the housing affordability situation actually worse than it should have been.
Now, Will isn't saying we should axe the stress test, but maybe it's more stressful than it needs to be. Most Canadians are keeping up with their payments. Mortgage arrears are at the lowest levels in decades, even with these higher interest rates.
But guess what? People can still afford to make the payments. Why? It's because they have more income. Because their incomes have grown.
This November, changes are coming. Anyone renewing their mortgage with a different bank won't have to pass the stress test again. But right now, wages are going up faster than inflation, and falling interest rates are making home ownership more affordable. For Develle Morrison, the Toronto real estate broker, those are signs that it's time to say bye-bye to the stress test.
It's over. It's really time to move on and maybe, I was about to say come up with something else, but no, please don't come up with something else.
For the Cost of Living, I'm Danielle Nerman.
This is The Cost of Living on your radio, by podcast, and on Sirius Channel 169. I'm Paul Havershrud.
Jams keep jammier, hams keep hammier, cakes keep cakier, flakes keep flakier, Tupperware freshness, that's our promise. Look at all the ways we keep it.
Tupperware may have kept jams jammier, but no one knew that until Brownie Wise came along. She pioneered the Tupperware party and made Tupperware a staple in Canadian kitchens for decades. Well, that was then. Now, Tupperware, which paved the way for Gladware, Rubbermaid, and every other plastic food container, has filed for bankruptcy. What's left over, though, is a legacy that goes beyond just keeping hams hammier. Bob Keeling is the author of Life of the Party, the remarkable story of how Brownie Wise built and lost a Tupperware party empire. Hello.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here, Bob. So can we start at the beginning? What were the early days like for Tupperware?
Oh, they were pretty limited indeed. I mean, very humble beginnings. In my Life of the Party book, I actually interviewed the gentleman who drove the legendary first truck filled with Tupperware into the warehouse here in Orlando in 1951 to start the home parties division. And it was basically he coming straight out of the Marines, Brownie Wise being the general manager of the sales end of it, and a bookkeeper. And that was pretty much it. You know, they set up shop in an old airplane hangar in Orlando in 51. And really, for all intents and purposes, that's how it began.
So you mentioned Brownie Wise. Now, from what I understand, Tupperware was invented by this guy, Earl Tupper, but it really wasn't getting much traction until Brownie Wise, stepped up. Can you tell us about Brownie Wise?
What Brownie did was she had a very clever, feminized way of selling the products. It was what you call a demonstration product. Before they had the parties, it sort of languished on store shelves in cities like Detroit, where people didn't know how to use it. They didn't know how to lock in the freshness with now the iconic, the burp and the seal and all that. But that was critical to locking the air out, ensuring the freshness. And so that was a part that had to be shown to would-be customers. So enter Brownie Wise, and she would have these parties where the Tupperware would be set up front, really stylishly arranged, so it didn't have that sort of negative connotation of plastic products before them. And it was more of an event. It was a social occasion for women to be able to get out of the house, dress up a little bit, talk to their, friends and neighbors. And Brownie, she would take the Wonder Bowl. She'd open it up. She'd pour possibly some grape juice in it. She'd burp it. She'd seal it. Then she'd throw the bowl across the room. And can you imagine if the grape juice would spill all over someone's living room? So that was a very visceral way to show that, hey, this product works.
So Brownie was a showwoman.
Absolutely. And she was a genius motivator. Despite being really minimally educated, she knew how to speak to her workforce's dreams.
Well, then how did the Tupperware party and what Brownie was bringing to the table here, how did that change things for the company?
Well, finally, there was someone and there was some way, some delivery method for Earl Tupper to bring his baby to the world. He designed Tupperware after a paint can, basically, to lock in the air so the paint wouldn't dry. It's the same concept with the product, but he just couldn't sell it. So finally, when he sees that, Brownie she's in suburban Detroit, she's got her own, wing of people selling the product, and his market research people are like, I don't know what she's doing, but we need to find out. They send a guy there. She talks about the home parties and how popular it was in post-World War II America. And they said right then and there, well, how would you like to have all of the state of Florida to run that? And she and her son, Jerry, took about 5 seconds and said, yes, we would. That was 1951.
Did other companies see what was happening with Tupperware and try to imitate this model?
Eventually. Eventually they did, but Tupper had a patent, which did end up running out. But in this time period, they couldn't just do some cheap knockoff product and try to undercut him by selling something cheaper. That didn't happen. But you did have products like Mary Kay Cosmetics, for instance, with Mary Kay Ash, doing the same sort of home party type situation and bringing women into the workforce. But Tupperware really in the 50s and 60s was so iconic because there really was nothing like it. It worked so well. It built communities, it built businesses, it helped build families. And that's why it was so iconic. And people everywhere would tell me when I was writing the book Life of the Party, oh yeah, I still have my mom's, or I still have my grandmother's. It really was just in a place all of its own in terms of, the American landscape in post-World War II America.
So everybody knows Tupperware. People call plastic food containers Tupperware, whether they're, Gladware or Rubbermaid, or whatever. Tupperware is a household name, but why isn't Brownie Wise really a household name?
Well, the yin and the yang of Brownie Wise and Earl Tupper, they couldn't have been more different personalities. And as this product game just skyrocketed onto the national scene, Tupper very intentionally made Brownie Wise the quote unquote it girl. And she had quite a modern story. She was a divorced mother of a young son. She said, I wasn't a liberator. I needed to make money. And so she did that. And she became sort of a one-name celebrity before we had, the Chers and the Madonnas, especially around here. Everybody knew who Brownie was. But as time went on, and they just had such extraordinary growth and popularity, it's hard to keep following that up year after year with higher sales and higher profits. And finally, in 1957, 1958, Earl Tupper was concerned that taxes on his fortune could cripple his estate. Whether that was true or not, I don't know. He wanted to sell the company. He had spent so much time building it. And on, Brownie's point of view, she was in Cosmopolitan magazine. She had national media coming down to the home party headquarters in Kissimmee for their jubilees. So, the publicity was great. But eventually Tupper thought Brownie was becoming more about herself rather than the product. And they butted heads a lot. And finally he thought, okay, if I'm going to sell this company, it's probably not going to be advantageous to have this rather strong, outspoken woman. And because of some things that had happened, including at the 1957 Jubilee, where there was some serious problems, he went out there and unceremoniously pushed her out of the company at the beginning of 1958. And basically, after she was gone, Earl Tupper literally wanted her written out of the company history. And executives there told me they weren't allowed to even say her name.
Well, then what ended up happening to Brownie after that?
She ended up starting her own cosmetics company. She was a business consultant. Also, she and her son, Jerry, made pottery, and she was a very accomplished artist. So it's not like it's a totally tragic story. But the sad part is she never got to come back to Tupperware in later years and be recognized for the indelible mark that she had made on this iconic American and now multinational company.
We said her legacy wasn't really recognized until many years later. When you think about Tupperware, Brownie Wise, the home party, what that did for women, does she have a legacy out there, especially for women?
Yes, she does. And to their credit, right about the time my book Life of the Party was coming out, Tupperware announced that they were dedicating $200,000 to create the Brownie Wise Park. Also, they have sort of a museum that in later years was called the Chain of Confidence Center. And she and Tupper are very much on an equal footing as it recounts the history of the company. So to their credit, finally, after many years, Brownie Wise was recognized for what she did to bring success to Tupperware.
So you've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about Brownie Wise, researching Tupperware. When you heard that Tupperware was filing for bankruptcy, what was your reaction?
Well, it certainly is a sad thing, but I will say, because it's Chapter 11, as I understand it, this is more like a protective type move where they can reorganize their debt. So it's not like the company is just going to go away as if it ever could, right? Or the product. So it will be interesting to see how they emerge from these economic challenges. But when you think about it, just the cachet of the home party is long gone. You have products like Rubbermaid that are readily available in department stores. And Tupperware finally joined that party, if you will, but they were a little late to the game. And I think there are some challenges in terms of, okay, what does 21st century Tupperware look like? But I am hopeful that through this Chapter 11 move, they'll be able to reemerge as a company that's better prepared to compete.
Finally, Bob, what do you call the thing that you put your leftovers in?
You call it Tupperware.
I do too.
Yeah, that's absolutely what you do.
I don't think I've ever even had Tupperware, and I think I call it Tupperware.
That's the ultimate compliment, isn't it? You know, there's a few other products that, you know, like Band-Aids, for instance, or, you know, that's one that comes, or Coke, you know, just some of these products that are ubiquitous. But yeah, Tupperware is right up there. So I wouldn't know what else to call it, Paul.
Me neither. Bob, thanks a lot for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Bob Keeling is the author of Life of the Party, the remarkable story of how Brownie Wise built and lost a Tupperware party empire. That's all for the show. Coming up next week, why some Canadian travelers are falling out of love with Airbnbs and giving hotels another chance. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Daniel Nerman, Ellis Cho, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Caroline Ferris. I'm Paul Havershrud. Thanks for listening.